Hi, everybody. How are you? Recently, I had talked to a friend of mine, and I was talking about this experience of grief. And I wanted to start documenting my journey, and I just didn't even know where to, but through our messages and interactions, she was like, Christina, I think you need to document this journey, because she was like, there are so many people going through grief and they don't know how to deal with it, or they're experiencing the same things as you, and sometimes people need to hear it. So my experience with grief has been very, how can I put it, it's been a roller coaster. September 30th, my dad died, and it was one of those things that there were a wave of emotions. The first week after the funeral was really tough, and visiting the grave site to finally put into the realization in my mind that he was no longer here and he no longer existed. But it was painful because I had been a caregiver for my dad for nearly a year, and I had become so accustomed. My body had a rhythm now. I knew when to wake up to check on him, to check on his breathing, to check, for certain things that my body had already adjusted to the rhythm of his own body. So it was one of those things that it was very hard for me to deal with, and it's still very hard for me to deal with. The pain of losing a parent is real. I don't even think people understand, especially with a father and a daughter. There is a bond, and there's a bond with all the children, but daddy-daughter bonds hit a little bit different. November 30th is going to mark 2 months that my dad has been gone, and the things that I have experienced during the time of his absence. I have experienced compassion. I have experienced people who are empathetic. I have experienced people who are selfish. I have experienced people who have no sympathy. The things that I have witnessed, during this journey were very eye-opening. I remember a lot of people were telling me before my dad had transitioned, a lot of people were like, Christina, you are going to really see people's true intentions. You're going to really see the heart of people after your dad passed. And when I tell you, I seen the true intentions, the true motives of people after my dad's passed. God revealed to me a lot of people's hearts. There's a lot of people, I don't even like to say family, because sometimes there's a lot of friends that I have that I consider family, but I would say a lot of things that I witnessed with blood, disrespect, a lot of insensitivity of my time, many things that I had to endure, and God had to teach me how to kind of just let things roll off of my shoulder. But through it all, I've learned how God's peace has kept me and how it has guarded me. I never thought, and it's not saying never, you never are prepared to deal with the loss of a loved one. And the thing was, God had allowed me to see that it was going to happen. He gave me a vision that I would be put in position to be there for my dad until his last breath. And that's exactly what it was. God allowed me to be in place. But even though when God has given us that cue, like, hey, I'm setting you up, I'm preparing you to be in this position, I'm preparing you to be in this place, no one is ever really prepared to be in that position to watch your loved one deteriorate and go. I've learned so much within these almost past 2 months about people, about life. God has even used this experience to teach me about the kind of wife I need to be. He even used it as a training ground to prepare me as a wife, as a spouse. And it also softened my heart as a daughter, as a sister, as a mother. I never thought the pain of losing someone was this deep. And there's certain things that trigger me, certain things that people say, certain things that people do that kind of put me in a place where I get emotional. And there's certain times I may go somewhere and I may see somebody that reminds me of my dad. I've learned that everybody's experience is completely different. And, you know, a lot of people have asked me, like, Christina, have you thought about grief therapy? And I've tried, and when I hear grief therapy, it sends a trigger. Like, even now talking about it, like, it's God has been my grief counselor. God has been my therapist during this ordeal. And as God continues to comfort me during this time, I don't think people understand that the grief of a caregiver is so different from the others. And it's not to dim down the grief of others, but you know, a lot of times you play back the moments that you were taking care of your loved one, and you begin to reflect on those moments. And, you know, I was honored and privileged to really just be there with my dad. And I'm so honored that I had that time with him. But that pain is real. It's real. It's real. It's real. And, you know, I've learned people. I've learned who my friends were. I've learned who was considerate of my emotions. I've learned so much. And in that process of me learning so much, God has even really allowed me to see how I evolved, how I've changed, how I've responded to certain things that would make me angry, and I'm no longer angry. And it's tough. And, you know, everybody told me they were, you know, people were like, Christina, after the funeral, that's when you're going to really feel it. The calls are going to stop. Nobody's going to really check in on you anymore. They say usually the first week when somebody transitions, that's when you experience and talk to a lot of people, and, you know, but after those moments when you're alone, that's when it really hits you. And it does hit me, because there's been moments that people have came by and asked about my dad and not known that he's passed, and I find myself in that space of mourning and grieving the loss of my dad, because now I'm having to explain to people what happened. Even today, there was a mailman that came by the house, and he was delivering mail, and he was like, hey, how's your dad? He said, every time I would deliver mail, your dad would sit outside and wait for the mail. And I said, my dad died on September 30th. And he was like, I'm so sorry. So having to be in that space where your loved one was, it's like you're grateful to be in the things that they created, but it also is a reminder of so much more. And during this time, I just usually find myself wanting to be in places that my dad was. It helps me to cope. You know, I'll probably sit at his favorite restaurant just to be in peace. And I just find myself reliving and doing things that he's done before. But I want to encourage anybody who is grieving, grieve the best way you know how. Don't listen to other people tell you how to grieve. Grieve. Ask God to guide you through this process. Because when I tell you it's so unexpected, it's so sneaky, you're not even going to understand the moments that it happens. It just happens at the awkward of times. But everybody's journey is different. So I want to encourage you. Cry when you have to cry. Scream when you have to scream. Don't suppress it. Let it out. The worst thing you could do is hold on and not express those feelings, these emotions, or address them. Grief therapy may be for you. It may not be for you. This journey has truly been about trusting God. Trusting God, opening my eyes to people and things that I was never open to before. And it's been one heck of an experience. But as you grieve, continue to allow God to minister to you. Allow Him to build you up. Allow His strength to be magnified in your weakness, because that's the perfect thing about being weak, brokenhearted, and vulnerable. But don't allow it to put you in a place that you neglect yourself and your gifts. Just trust that there's a plan behind the pain. And just know that God is the source of everything. And I know the pain, some people say it'll get easier. I don't think it gets easier. I think you just learn how to live with it. It becomes a new normal where your life has to adjust to living without this person. So continue to be in that place where you grieve the best way you know how, and allow God to bring you to that place of, I don't want to say healing, because the people that I've talked to, a lot of them said they haven't healed, but allow God to bring you into that place where you're able to navigate this new normal. Be encouraged.